Sue, on this business of the invisible reweaving, which is so controversial, is it possible to get a sample of an invisible reweaving that's really invisible to show the skeptics that it really exists?
Well, I'm going to ask Paul
If you want
Maloney.
to do it yourself, I have a manual here that will
I don't want to make anything invisibly rewoven. I'm pretty clumsy.
This is published by the Fabricon Company. I think it was in 4 different editions. I happen to have the 3rd edition. They ceased in 1967. Is this better? They ceased publication in 1967. The company went out of business and it no longer exists. But this is a manual on how to do invisible reweaves, and if you follow this to the letter, you will create something that is invisible both on the front and the back of your cloth.
And
Now-
tell him that Russ is going to be.
Oh, yes, Russ Brill is going to be scanning this manual. There he is over there. He's going to be scanning this manual for his textile department on Shroud University. So you'll have access to this data.
And it does have pictures, right?
Yes, this does have pictures.
Well, I mean, that ought to put this nonsense that comes out of Corinne that it's impossible, you know, it just annoys the hell out of me. I don't know, I can't imagine how it must annoy you guys.
Well, one little observation here, it shows when you pull a yarn that you have freshly put into place, you pull it up with tweezers and then you snip it off with scissors right at the warp thread. If it still sticks up, you pull the garment or the cloth out and it pulls it underneath the warp thread. You cannot see the end.
Next question. I have a comment and a caution perhaps for Ryan. We know that Jesus had a Jewish mother, but
Here comes the no answer.
so that the Y chromosome might be interesting because he did not have a normal father in the biological sense. It was a virginal conception. So I don't know, you know, the mitochondrial DNA should be okay in terms of locating it within that ethnic group and so on. But the Y chromosome might well be interesting, to say the least.
You know, there was a DNA, an unauthorized DNA analysis done in '95 at the University of Texas Health Science Center. No, Victor Tryon. I didn't know that.
And I have in the same thing another little section. In our conference in Turin in 2000, there was a statement that there was not enough DNA collected to say if it is a male or female, the man of the shroud, or the blood of the man of the shroud.
What year was that?
2000, March.
This was another thing. I can explain.
You know, Joe, let me make a quick point. Before I give it over to Ryan, I just want to make a point that in 1995, Garza Valdez had a sample of the blood that he, without permission, gave to Victor Tryon at the University of Science Health Center in San Antonio. He did not have mitochondrial DNA available at that point in time, 95. His test showed male human DNA heavily degraded. And Al Adler, before he died, told me he felt mitochondrial DNA, which was just coming out, he felt that the shroud blood would be a very good candidate for that type of testing. So just so that you have that as background, that was, but they did determine male human, and by the way, both the X and the Y chromosome were there.
I believe it's a Y chromosome, but I don't know where it came from.
Yeah.
I'm
Can't
sure,
speak
I don't know how to answer that because you have to go by on expectations. So I would expect, I mean, so Jesus couldn't have been a haploid individual, I mean, wandering around with just his mother's chromosomes. So my expectation, I have to go with what the populations probably would have looked like at that time. So I would I would definitely have to look for a Cohen haplotype. If you don't find that, then what's the scientific explanation? There isn't any. That could never be published your peers would never allow you to publish that. So I understand what you're saying from a religious, philosophical point of view, but from a scientific point of view, scientists just aren't that liberal, if I can use that word. They're very process-driven and very results-driven. So there has to be, scientists are like, if I can't see it, then it's not there. And that's what we're working with.
Yeah, we've heard that before.
If I may, please, there are two basic kinds of questions when we come to the shroud. And the question this gentleman just asked is a theologically oriented question. Most of us here have been dealing with the scientific aspect. The issue of transubstantiation is another issue that is theologically oriented, but which impinges upon our scientific interest. If I may, many of you will know Father Adam Otterbein. He's now gone from our midst. But one day, I was sitting in front of a Nikon optophone, a microscope, in Dr. David Wright's office, and I was examining sticky tape 4BD. And some of those of you who are in the know will realize that is the sticky tape that Max Fry removed from the blood flow across the anatomically right arm, left arm. As I focused my microscope, I saw these reddish particles. And since it came from the blood flow, I said, uh-oh, this may be either Macron's iron oxide, or it may be blood from the man of the shroud. So I called Father Adam. He was up at Esopus, New York, and he answered the phone. I said, Father, are you sitting down? And he said, yes. He says, and I guess because you've asked that question, you must have something momentous to say. I said, I'm sitting here in front of this Nikon optophone. And I said, I'm focusing the microscope on what I believe may be blood. He was silent. He didn't say a thing for the longest time. And I felt like an eternity. But pretty soon he said, well, science must carry on. Move it forward.
You know, if I could just real quick, Joe. Because I lecture to a lot of different kind of groups, I'm often confronted with questions like that. And my sort of stock answer now is that the things that we, the STIRP team, and others like us from the scientific side of things do are different than those from the theological point of view. But many of the questions that, like the one you asked, are really not questions for scientists. Those are tests of faith, not science. Yeah. And that's a separate issue. I know you can't separate them completely, but it really is. So those of us that have worked on the science side of the shroud are really obligated to stay within the credibility of science, because you know how tough it is to get important information, credible information out to the public, and the minute they hear that you say anything that might have any slight religious overtones, it's immediately discounted or worse.
I want to make some notes about the comments, especially from Danin, because perhaps there is some confusion about the DNA analysis and the blood analysis. The first analysis was done by Baima Bollone about in 1955-56, who gave some samples of blood to Genoa University. And Professor De Stefano studied in terms of DNA these samples and found that these samples came from both male and female DNA. So the first interpretation was that there were a big contamination in the samples. Recently, Frank Tipler wrote a book in English in which he re-examined the data published perhaps in 2000 conference at Turin, in which he detects a particular species of DNA, and he supposes that it comes not from a contamination, but from a unique source, and he hypothesizes that this sample was originated by a very particular parthenogenesis. Then Garzavaldez studied other blood coming from rigidinumana samples, and gave some results that are not published in their completeness. Other samples were given by rigidinumana to me, I think to others, and they are under study.
Joe, could I just say? Sure. And a lot more direct to your question, a lot of the tools are now being developed. In 2000, for example, we didn't have many STRs, which have been developed by the Armed Forces Identification Laboratory, for example, trying to identify soldiers buried in Hawaii that were killed in the Korean War. So a lot of these techniques are moving forward. And I think you just can't emphasize enough. I guess I'm a great sort of skeptic in ancient DNA work because unless it's done under the right conditions, the problem with contamination is horrendous. Right. So anything I think that's been done recently, before 2000, it would be very, very difficult to believe that was not contamination if it doesn't make phylogenetic sense, or if it isn't placed where it is supposed to be, because DNA is just simply everywhere. We have a sample just last week that came from a Pacific island that no one was supposed to have touched, maybe just the excavators handled, and maybe one other person very carefully. It was done under controlled conditions, and there are mixtures in the sample already. And it's been shown that some people just actually shed DNA. So some shed, some don't. And so there's all kinds of technicalities with this. Unless the quality assurance and quality control is very strict, it's difficult. Most labs that would have done this work probably work on human DNA, and they amplify the DNA, they copy it. And once they finish one of those experiments, there's millions, there's billions of copies of that just in the air. So you have to be so extremely, extremely careful. And that's why, even evidence has to be admissible in a court of law. That's why you have to show a chain of custody, you have to show where this was at, how it was handled in a certain way, was it clean? There's just, there's a lot to it because we didn't know it, but before 1953, but DNA is just everywhere.
I'm just going to one quick thing. Just one thing I want to point out, that the STIRP team operated in their civilian clothes, with often with our hands bare. We started with white cotton gloves, and we know what problem that created. And we all left our DNA on the shroud. I mean, I leaned on it, I touched it, I breathed it on it, and so did everybody else. The nuns who were unstitching things touched it. The priest touched it. The Archbishop of Turin, Anastasio Ballestero, came in, took a handkerchief out of his pocket, touched it to the shroud, put it back in his pocket. So, the Shroud of Turin and DNA and contamination, I'm certainly not the expert, but I was there and watched how everybody was like reverent around it and wanted to touch it. And so everybody left their DNA on.
Have you been in 2000 in March? You have been there?
To
2000.
At Sindone 2000?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
With Scannerini and...
Oh, you're talking about the Via Gualino. No, I wasn't there.
Yeah,
So I thought if you were there, you could say what you say now.
Same
Somebody
problem.
came in front of the audience of the 30 scientists invited from the rest of the world, and he was saying that there is not enough DNA on the shroud to say if it is a male or female. This is.
I wasn't there.
And you said that you have to be careful. I was careful. I didn't do it. I quote to you what was said there.
yeah. Just a comment, one of our collaborators, how this all started, we got a sticky tape sample of blood from Ray.
Louder.
Oh, Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? We got a sticky tape sample from Ray Rogers with a really good little blood sample on it, and it was, clearly identified as a red blood cell. One of our collaborators, Andy Merriweather, who you may or may not know, works at SUNY in New York. Andy was able to analyze that. We needed to get another sample from another source, another place on the shroud. That's where Julio came in, and we got Ryan involved at another lab to try to corroborate the sequence that we found in Andy's lab. Now, let me tell you about that sample. That sample was so contaminated with multiple, this is one little red blood cell. Now, clearly, you can drop all the hair and stuff you want on it, but unless you're dropping red blood cells, it wasn't, there were no more than just that one sample is what I'm saying. So it's had still so many sequences on it that it was completely confusing. What the goal was to get other samples from different parts of the shroud, and the goal still is this. We need to get different samples from different parts of the shroud to see if we can match, like a puzzle piece, pieces that might match from the various sample sites. If you can do that, and I don't have hopes that we can get any kind of full sequence, I mean, that's, I think, beyond expectations at this point, but if we could match partial sequences, that might be useful in at least some kind of geographic location. I also did talk to Victor Tryon at some great length before we proceeded with our trial, and he is not at all, what do you want to say, supportive of even his own work. He believes it also was a very contaminated piece, and he did not support the statements made in Garza's book. So I would really caution you, this is a very difficult process. I think what Ryan's done right now, just to reinforce the fact that the sample was blood, is still a very important one. And if we go forward, we need to be aware that we need a lot of samples, and we need them from different places on the shroud, from different extraction locations, and if we can then match an identical twin sequence in any of those various areas done at separate labs, then we might have something.
I almost forgot what I was going to say now. It was going to be good.
It was good.
He forgot what he was going to say. He's working on it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what
Something
I
else,
was...
contamination,
what I
about
was-
Andy's, about the multiple samples in Andy's.
You'll think of it as soon as...
Yeah, okay, finally came back. So I think that's one of the issues. What I would envision, you would, and this probably will never happen unless there's another opportunity, but you would have to go, and I was talking to Dr. Schneider yesterday, so could you actually identify places on the shroud that likely had high concentrations of blood? Then you'd have to go in, you could probably clean those with an air duster to blow everything else away, and then take some sticky tape and samples, or I would even wonder if there was, well, it would have to be sticky tape probably, or here we say Scotch tape. But that's what you'd have to do, because you'd have to show a high concentration of your target molecule. And then there probably yet would be some contamination, but if you could show, by the way, there are statistical tests you can do with what we call in the business cloning, which doesn't mean we're going to make another Shroud of Turin man, but that we're going to clone the DNA sequences. Then you can do a statistical test to show if you've really captured ancient DNA. So I think that's one approach, but you would have to be able to ensure that you are sampling an area that had a high density of blood.
I wonder if I make one more comment here. I haven't had a chance, and I apologize, Alan Wanger, I haven't had a chance to talk with you about this, but on sticky tape 4BD, that is the primary, that has a lot of what we would identify as potential for blood. The other sticky tape is 2BD, which has potential for blood, but it comes from the shin on I think it's the right leg, the shin of the right leg. So there are at least 2 sticky tape samples in the Max Fry collection that might have potential for this study, but I can't think of any others. Alan has some photographs up here he's got. Yeah, in fact, that is so large, you can actually see it on that photograph.
Back there.
My question's actually for Joe, so I might want you to look at my notes here and put a few things in here that I missed. But I don't have a lot of expertise in the shroud other than I've watched, but I have to add a couple sentences because, hey, I'm a blood bank supervisor, or have been. If indeed the blood on the shroud is AB, usually A comes from the mother, B from the father, or vice versa. There are rare times when possibly the allele could break and you could get both AB from the mother. But to me, that does not cancel the Immaculate Conception. I think if God made the universe, he could put a fetus in Mary's womb with any blood type he wanted. But, you know, that's getting along the religious lines. However, on this AB typing, I always wanted to know if negative control was run, because in blood banking, if we type someone AB positive, we must have negative control, because some blood will agglutinate with everything, especially denatured. So that's one thing I wanted to ask anyone that knows about the AB testing. And
The AB
right
is
in
not
this
a
area.
solid piece of evidence.
I can point to
Probably
many
unlimited
people.
reasons.
Yeah, from any population who might have the blood type.
Right, but see, they found that supposedly the shroud blood was AB, and the sedarium, another clot related to the shroud also. Can I just say one thing? I'm just going to make this point, and you can amplify. Al Adler pointed out that the AB blood typing of the shroud was that apparently blood typing is based on certain enzymes that are found in the blood, and the absence in older blood, the older the blood gets, these enzymes degrade, and apparently the absence or low count of these enzymes yields an AB result. So it's difficult to, because I know people, you try to tie the sedarium and the shroud together because of the AB blood type, but I don't know that there's a real valid scientific claim to be made there, and the expert can amplify.
Sorry,
Throw that right to you.
that was good.
I exchanged correspondence with Al. I exchanged some correspondence with Al because I had a slide in my original slide presentation on the AB blood. Because AB blood is particularly, occurs with a very high percentage relative to the other population in the general population and Jewish populations. So I thought, boy, that's cool. And it also was the typing of the miracle of the blood at Lanciani. So I thought, well, that's cool. There's blood there. The blood's AB. That's AB. The probability, the joint probability is like 1 in 1,000. And then Al dissuaded me. Al basically pointed out that very old blood, and probably Paul knows all about this, very old blood tends to always type AB because breakdown products in the cell walls of the blood contain the elements that normally type to A and B. So that's, can I just say one thing though about this blood deal? I was wondering if maybe you could use the transmitted light photographs to identify the densest blood stains on the shroud, and then acquire blood samples from the back of the shroud so as not to damage in any way because I'm sure they're very sensitive to the appearance of the shroud, and continuing to stick sticky tapes on the front of the shroud. Somebody said that some of Max Fry's areas are already darkening faster than other areas, so you're starting to be able to see where the sticky tapes were.
Yeah.
But would it not be, I mean, I don't know that much about the shroud, being sort of a shroud rookie, but would it not be that the back of the shroud, it sounds like it was covered by the Holland cloth for some length of time?
Now it's another cloth.
Now it's another cloth, but that would likely protect it from contamination for several hundreds Hundreds
blood
of
would
years.
be, you know, your blood obtained from the back would be less
Would be less
likely to
contaminated.
contaminated than blood from the front.
Good idea, Rick.
That's a big plus.
Yeah, good idea. And the,
It's,
and I made the
a
franchise.
private talk we had,
I already know where they're going.
Peter Suns and I, in Torino, last March, and we asked them, will you be so kind to let us work on the dust that remained from your important work on the rearrangement of the
restoration.
so that we cannot work on that anymore. Will you be so kind to let us work on that? So it is not blood from the other side. It is dust out of the shroud. And he said, if we give you the dust to study pollen, as you suggest, there are additional 50 requests for research, and we will have to answer all of them, and we don't have the, I think they were saying, Peter, do you remember? That we don't have the
They
sufficient
don't want anybody.
manpower to handle that, so we postpone it. Maybe in time there will be less and less requests for research, etc.
I could tell you stories.
Well, this is like, the Shroud of Moses or something. It's just this is Joseph's dream coat.
Exactly, exactly. It really is, it really is. And the people who control that are cult. They're called the-
Now, basically, what they're told is that when they get requests, it's being sent to the Secretary of State of the
They wouldn't
Vatican,
even understand.
and he and the Pope they decide if something is going to be done, yes
You
or
can
no.
do it, you can touch it.
So the end decision is not taken in Turin, but in the Vatican.
It's power trip, it's Machiavelli. He was Italian.
Question, was it originally AB positive or AB negative?
They didn't get those.
I've never heard that
detail.
ever.
I don't remember reading the designation actually, it's always
They
just.
just said type AB is all we've
AB
ever
is
heard.
always it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether it's plus or negative.
Well, those are antigens, proteins on the surface.
Mark thinks that Byman Maloney said that it might have been AB negative. We probably have to check the reference on that. Mark says Byman Maloney
Byman
said
Maloney,
maybe
Byman Maloney.
AB negative. We'd have to check that.
But that's sort of irrelevant anyway, isn't it?
I guess there's an old joke there.
When we started the program, he was giving us this table up there. He's the head of the temple. It's about baloney. We just got the baloney baloney.
That's a good question. I'd like to look that up. I'd have to look that up.
Closer.
Do you know?
Closer. I didn't hear the question.
The size, the exact size of the raised sample. I have to look it up and look at some of the pictures there and do an actual measurement, or I may have it in one of my papers. It's about, just,
But no scale to be able to do a precise measurement.
you can see a scale probably over there, I would imagine, on the,
Yeah,
if
it's
you
all,
look at a
If
picture.
you go to Mario's site and
do the measurement on the
pixel
pixel-based
measurements, from his site and get probably a closer estimate than you get anyplace else.
Yeah. If you figure the cutout piece is 5.5 by 3.5 inches, you can go from there and do a measurement based on a picture and get an exact
is
measurement.
Mario using my tape?
Mario has, he's got the Andre picture, he's got the Pia picture, and he's got Durante 2002. So you can go and measure pixels on any of those, and there's a conversion factor.
Is there a calibration target of some sort?
I don't know where he got the calibration. I'd say the calibration is probably no better than 1%. So.
Okay.
The easiest thing to do is to look at the cutout.
For pixel-based, that's
5.5
close
by
enough, I
3.5 inches.
And the three labs that did the tests, I mean, they all returned essentially the same result?
No, they did not.
No?
No?
No.
Could you comment on that?
Well, as we showed there, the three labs who had 4 different pieces, Arizona had a piece on one end and a piece on the other end, which were significantly different. But each of those, the samples were considered significantly different from each other, so they were not from the same population. And the reason is because the patch was in a skewed angle from the edge of the material from whence it was cut.
So the dates that came back were different from each lab.
They came back different from each lab. And what they did is they threw the outliers out. Actually, they threw out, from what I understand, quite a bit of data to make it kind of congeal into a middle range from
Uniform result.
1260 to 1390, right? But the interesting thing about that is, there's been comments that there might be some incompetence on their part, or that they did not do a good job. When they did their control samples, they were right on target. They were extremely close, and they were statistically significant, and they were shown each of the different control samples to be right on the nose.
It's 1:45, I'm afraid we're going to have to move on. If you have any other questions, you might want to ask the individuals some other time. We also have a, yes, we also do have a 2-hour C14 discussion tonight.
Okay,